know this, but the Human Planet was a response to a sort of growing interest in the sort of general public in all things tribal, personified mainly by Bruce Parry, who seemed to capture the hearts of a lot of people in his series Tribe. And Human Planet was filmed entirely by the Natural History Unit in Bristol, who have done all of the big productions that you probably know, Life, Planet Earth, all of Attenborough stuff. And the idea was essentially to take a bunch of natural history cameramen and ask them to turn their cameras on the human species and see what they come up with. No one quite knew how well it would work, and believe me when I say, even when the night of the premiere, we were all huddled around Twitter with our fingers crossed, waiting for people to say nice things about it, which fortunately they did. My role, although I love showing that video, I can't claim any responsibility for it, unfortunately. That was the work of a lot of other people. I was brought in to travel with as many of the film crews as I could, for as long as I could, and document what we were focusing on for the purposes of a book, a DVD cover, and all multimedia things that happen these days from big productions like this. The BBC actually had four crews, 4 film crews working. There were 8 episodes. Each crew was in charge of 2 episodes. For example, this image comes from the Oceans episode. Oceans were also in charge of jungles. So there were 4 teams covering 8 habitats, essentially. And my job was to kind of weave a pathway through as many of these shoots as I possibly could. But it wasn't easy, obviously, because there's only one of me and there were a lot of them. So I ended up probably covering about 50% of the shoot, and there were 80 shoots in total. So we formulated my itinerary around which ones we thought were the best. This is actually a place called Tun Sakaran National Park in Sabah, which is where we filmed the Sea Gypsies, the Bajau Laut, which was a very popular sequence in the film. This guy, Sylvin, who is a free diver who's quite incredible in his abilities to hold his breath, essentially. And you may remember quite an interesting scene where he basically hunts along the bottom of the sea, as you or I might hunt on land with a spear gun. You see here, he's actually holding a piece of coral to add a bit of weight to him, because he was quite a waif, little thin guy. He had actually had it cold when we were filming him, and he's a smoker, believe it or not. But he still managed to stay down. I think on the film we clocked him in at about 4 minutes. He uses exactly the same technique that what's that lady called? The tall blonde lady who does free diving. She does BBC programs. I can't remember her name. Sorry, but he uses exactly the same technique of breathing, essentially. So what I'm going to quickly do is just run through each episode very quickly and just show you a few stills from those episodes, and then I picked 4 stories which I thought you might like to see in a bit more detail. This is still a picture from the Bajau Laut sequence. That's a young sea gypsy girl who was living on a boat, which we lived alongside them on our boat for a couple of weeks. She's covered her face actually to protect her from the sun, as a lot of people don't like to get a tan, not me, unfortunately. One thing we discovered actually during filming, we had an anthropologist with us. I might add, no way am I'm very much an armchair anthropologist, so if any of you people here are students of anthropology, please excuse me when I rabbit on about something I don't really know what I'm talking about. But we discovered that Bajau Laut children actually, their eyes have adapted to seeing underwater, even though these guys are actually wearing goggles. They can see, apparently, they can see better than a normal person whilst swimming underwater. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, that's what the anthropologist said. Another of our sea episodes, which was rather controversial when we wondered whether we might get kind of a response from the general public, was the whale hunting sequence in La Malera in Indonesia. Unfortunately for me, I sat on a beach with these guys for 3 weeks and no whales came along. So unfortunately, I didn't get any photos of a whale being caught. We sent teams there on 4 separate occasions, a sort of a total of almost 2.5 months worth of sitting and waiting. And it happened once. That's the luck of the draw. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it, but that was an image that I did take while we were out on the boats. These guys have rejected, let's say, the use of motors. They still use sailboats, and whether or not it'll last, I don't know. But they certainly don't seem to be making much of a dent on the whale population around Malera. The grasslands episode. This was one of the most talked about stories, I suppose, down in southern Ethiopia. The Suri tribe, who live in an area near the Omo Valley, gather once a year during a 1-month period to have these meetings called dongo, which are essentially a huge fight using these giant sticks. Now, I might be talking about this one later, so I won't go into it in too much detail here. The mountains episode, you may recognise this character. He was called Derajay. He's a young 15-year-old boy who lived in the Simien Mountains of northern Ethiopia and spent his days protecting his family's farm from gelada baboons, who basically raid their farm and steal their crops. That was our camp during that shoot. Derajay's farm is, you can't quite see it, but I think I can just see some people tossing hay up there. It's just up there, and we positioned ourselves here, which quite often we would do when we were visiting these communities, because it's very hard to not have that impact on a place when they get so few visitors. So we tried to position ourselves as far away as we could. We had to take a walk up there, around here, around there, to get to where we were shooting. When we did get there, that's a gelada baboon, if anyone's interested. That's their crop. That's one of those photographs where you have to sit in a field for a day or two, but it doesn't take long. They're always there. And Derajay, the young lad in question, it was in a bit of a strange situation, really, because he would have been fined if he would have killed a baboon and someone would have found out, because they're actually a protected species in the Simien Mountains. So they are left to just throw rocks and generally scare them off that way. That's Maza, his sister, who was 6 years old, and as you can see, the place they live was just incredible. I mean, we were walking along cliff edges quite regularly whilst Maza was skipping along. Her job within the family was looking after the goats, and she would quite regularly be away from home for a couple of days at a time. One time in particular, I went with her, and we were too far away from home at nightfall, so we slept in a cave, and that's something Maza does all the time. No, it was not a problem for her at all. Another mountains story we covered, which was one of the stories that, funnily enough, even with a huge research team from the BBC, it's still very hard to find a story in the world that hasn't been photographed or filmed at some stage in history. And this story was actually one of those stories that actually hadn't been filmed. And thanks to one of our researchers, in fact, who was working on South Pacific, another program, a couple of years before. And they were flying over this area in a light aircraft when they spotted these holes in the forest. Didn't know what they were. When she got back, she inquired, and nobody seemed to know. So they made their way inland about 6 months later and discovered that they were actually bat traps. And the indigenous societies cut huge holes in the forest canopy, as you can see there, and fruit bats that feed in the lowlands on their travels back home to where they roost up in the mountains, look for the quickest way possible, fly through what they think is a hole, and end up dinner for somebody in Papua New Guinea. Fruit bats, as you can see, something that we did partake of all the food and strange foods that we were presented along the way. Most of them taste like chicken, as you would imagine. Okay, up into the Arctic now. I suppose for me personally, the Arctic was the area of the world that I spent the least amount of time, quite simply because some of the shoots in the Arctic were clocking in at 6, 8, 10 weeks, and I had a tough decision to make, which was, do I sit on an iceberg waiting for a narwhal for 3 months, or do 20 shoots in other parts of the country? And unfortunately, I had to do the latter. And consequently, I only visited the Arctic on a couple of occasions. One of them was this is Ilulissat in western Greenland. That's the moon, not the sun, from my end. Ilulissat sits in darkness for 3 months of the year, and at the first sunrise of the year, they have a little festival, a welcoming of the sun, and we went out there for that. It was in January. This was our main character, in fact, and if you remember from the program, we also did a sequence on the importance of dogs in the people of the Northern Arctic's lives. Another episode which certainly captured the imagination of people was the rivers episode. In particular, this sequence. That's a bit blown out, that picture, but that is a guy called Sam Liang, who was a fisherman on the Mekong River in Laos. Funnily enough, when the crew went there, I went to this shoot on my own because I was in another country at the time, and the crew went about 6 weeks before me, and I saw all their footage and rushes, and they told me they'd built a lovely little platform in a tree where I could get a great shot of what I needed to do, and it would all be hunky-dory. But when they were there, the water was slightly lower. In fact, there was about a 20-foot drop between there and the bed of the river. Obviously, 6 weeks later, during the monsoon, the river had swelled somewhat, and when I got there, there was no sign of the platform whatsoever. Everything was washed away. This area of the Mekong, called Sifandong, which kind of translates as the Thousand Islands, is essentially an area pitted with many, many tiny little islands. And Sam Liang makes the most of this during the rainy season, when fish are migrating upstream. Where they come through tiny gaps, it's actually very easy to catch fish. A lot of his colleagues use traps, and literally the fish just swim into the traps. Sam Liang himself is an old school fisherman. He uses a net, but still, the best places to fish are on the islands, and unfortunately, the only way there are across these incredibly precarious rope bridges. Needless to say, Sam Liang fishes alone, and I didn't go across that bridge anyway. In fact, to get that photograph, to take this photograph here, I had to sort of take a boat over the river, come round, do a bit of island hopping to a point where I was actually tied with ropes. We were just in the current, on shooting on a very long lens. If any of you are photographically minded, that's a 400mm lens, so I'm quite a long way away from him. Yeah, needless to say, I've got a lot of respect for Sam Liang, and in fact, most of the characters in our film. We had a good laugh, as you can see. It wasn't all work. Jungles. I'm sure quite a few of you have been here. This is Angkor Wat, Tar Prom, made famous, I think, in a Lara Croft film. They used it as the set. It was a small sequence about a civilization which had been lost and reclaimed by nature. That's actually the eldest monk from Tar Prom Monastery, which isn't that, it's just beside it. That's more of a tourist attraction than anything else. Another jungle story from Papua New Guinea. Also another one which we felt might have been quite controversial, especially since the cameraman who actually shot this sequence, shot the sequence in Planet Earth of the Bird of Paradise dance of the display. And then on this particular trip, obviously, the story was about the use of Bird of Paradise feathers in the tribal attire of the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And so yeah, unfortunately he had to come back this time and film them getting killed for the purposes of adorning somebody else. It was one of the more colourful shoots though. Onto the deserts. Another one I'll probably be talking about in a minute, so I won't go into it too much. That's Mongolia, and that's the Gobi Desert. But I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Quite late on in the day, initially we weren't planning on having an urban episode because this was a story about man and nature. But as the whole program was just under 5 years from start to finish to create, 2 of which were filming. About halfway through the filming, it was mentioned that maybe we should also talk about urban environments, and it was decided to have one program devoted to that. So we set about looking for stories of nature and man and nature, or woman and nature, in the urban environment. And one of the most touching stories that I was involved in was in Mombasa in Kenya, on the city's refuse dump, where people live alongside nature, and everyone's on the scavenge. Not an easy thing to shoot, but really, without sounding insensitive, a very happy bunch of people just getting on with their lives. There's not much really more to say about it. Living, working, making your life in amongst the rubbish. And that shot comes from Mombasa. There's a railway track running by the side of the dump. Another urban story was from Mali, in a place called Djenné, which is a city made completely of mud from the river that runs beside it. And right in the centre of Djenné is the mosque, which is the largest mud building in the world. And once a year, it gets replastered, and it's quite an event. The whole thing lasts one morning, and people come from all around to add their bit, picking up mud from the riverbed, which has been fermenting for months, and transporting it into the city on their heads, and replastering. Quite an incredible spectacle, something that happens every year, and something that any one of you could go and see if you want to. It's very easy to get to Djenné. Quite an amazing spectacle to watch. In fact, as you can see here, you can get involved as well. There's quite a few tourists alongside us while we're filming. And that's the mosque, quite an incredible building, really. And that's Djenné Marketplace. Okay, so I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into a couple of stories. When I was trying to pick a story, we went to Mongolia so many times for Human Planet, I couldn't just choose one, so I decided to talk about Mongolia in general. Because it's by far, right now anyway, it's my favourite country in the world. And I just love it. I've been back twice this year already. I think that's most people's impression of Mongolia. Grassland, horses, Genghis Khan, type stuff. That's most people's idea, I think, of life in Mongolia. And certainly, if you travel there in the summer on holiday, that's certainly the lifestyle you're going to see. I think, depending on where you read, 40 to 60% of the population still are nomadic, and certainly a large percentage of the population have live in gers, as you can see here. The thing about Mongolia is, If you go to the far west, this is Mongolia. 40% of Mongolia is covered in mountains, believe it or not. This is right in the far west on the border with, well, say the border with Kazakhstan. It's not exactly Kazakhstan, but Kazakhstan's about 30 miles from the border, is China. If you come down to the southwest, that's the Gobi Desert, another face of Mongolia that people often don't realise exists. I shot this actually last month. I was back in Mongolia and I went to visit the family. If you remember from the episode of the deserts episode, there was a story about camel herders, and that's then leading the pack that's Gambol, who was the main character's son, who took us out for a spin on the dunes. That's obviously in the summer. So Mongolia is a very diverse place. There is one thing that unifies Mongolia, though, and that's this structure, a ger. And any of you that have ever travelled around Mongolia will know it very intimately, I'm sure, because it's the preferred way of living for pretty much everyone in rural Mongolia. Saying that, there aren't a massive amount of people in rural Mongolia. I think the population of Mongolia is about 3 million, which, considering the size of it, is not many. The least densely populated place in the world, I think, country, let's say. So yeah, the ger is ubiquitous in Mongolia, from the east to the west to the Kazakhs. Everyone lives in gers. It's certainly one of the things that I love about the place. This is our family from the Grasslands episode who were rearing horses, and when we arrived, before they did anything, I asked them if they wouldn't mind if I did a time lapse of them when they were erecting the ger. It came out quite nice. That's about an hour and 15 minutes, and the whole family chip in, and you've got a kind of fully fledged abode. There we go, there goes the furniture. You see, everyone's in there, you go. In case you're wondering who lives in there, there they are. That's Adia, Mum, so yeah, gers. We lived in gers while we were there, obviously. That's our camp during the filming of the episode with the camels. I mean, you know, we had, as you can see, three gers. If I can go a bit closer, there you go. We slept in that one. Me, Toby, the cameraman, a producer, a director, and there was about 8 of us. Very snory at night, as you can imagine. We kept all our gear in there, and we cooked and ate in there. And there are 2 little Russian vehicles that got us there, incredible vehicles. This is where Gambol lived, who were the people we were filming. Once again, we positioned ourselves about a quarter of a mile away from them, in order, not that we figured we'd disturb them, because we were spending our whole lives with them anyway, but more to the point, we just didn't want to get in shot, and any of our gear would be in shot. So this is where they were living, at the foot of the dunes. I don't know how many of you have seen inside a ger, but it's actually, life in a ger is very nice and easy, and it's not what you would think. People have got satellite TV. This is modern Mongolia. Everyone has a solar panel. The government have issued grants to buy solar panels. So TV is there, or more to the point, that's Tetris, isn't it? A bit old-fashioned, but in fact TV is quite important, because a few years ago Mongolia sent some athletes over to Japan to train as sumo wrestlers, because Japan was looking to increase the viewership of sumo around the world, and currently the top 4 sumo wrestlers in the world are all Mongolians now. And the Mongolians love sumo, and we spend hours pointing satellite dishes outside Gairs trying to get the sumo live from Japan. That's two sons of Gambold's two youngest sons, and this was shot in the winter. When we were there in the winter, the Gobi's covered in snow, and it's very cold, -40 at night. If by mistake any lambs are born during this time, which these two were, they spend the winter inside because they would die if they were outside. Always get that reaction. I don't really like this photo, but I put it in because it was on the front. Someone picked it and put it on the front of the Radio Times. And of all the pictures I've ever shot, I've got so many people phoning and emailing. But it's one of those pictures I'm not really a fan of. I've put it in there to illustrate the fact that the family they're a very hard-working family, as are most families in rural Mongolia. This is the eldest daughter of Gambold, and that's their herd of cashmere goats, which is one of the very big cash crops in Mongolia currently. Not a good thing for the ecology of Mongolia, apparently, because goats tend to rip out the grass rather than the cattle, which just bite the tops off it. And it may turn into a problem, but the high price of cashmere wool at the moment is causing a lot of people to switch to cashmere. That's their herd of camels, which is their other crop, let's say. They don't do anything with them. They may rent them out in the summer to tourists if they're passing by, but they're really a way of maintaining your money in something, because they certainly don't eat them. Gambold himself obviously rides one. Yeah, one of those weird moments I had when I realised I was looking at a guy riding a camel in Mongolia. I didn't even know it snowed in Mongolia, in the Gobi Desert, to be honest. I was a bit naive. I didn't realise snow fell in deserts. In fact, it doesn't snow in the Gobi. It's blown there from Siberia, I'm told. So I wasn't that naive. So yeah, an epic landscape. That's the same, quite near actually, the spot from early on without the snow, the photo of the camels. But one part of Gambold's job in the winter is rounding up his camels. They only keep a couple of camels near the Ger, which they milk, and they make vodka from the milk. The rest of the camels roam freely, and every now and then they have to take off into the wilderness and round them up and bring them home, and this is one such case. Back now to the grasslands of Mongolia, which are the more public version of Mongolia, I think, that most people know about. That's the eldest daughter of Adia, who was our family that we were filming. They're horse herders and cashmere goat owners also. These are the goats, that's them corralling their stock up. Very late on in the shoot, we travelled with their family during their nomadic migration. Essentially, all Mongolians travel between a summer pasture and a winter pasture, and quite often they have a stop in between, so often they're moving 4 times a year, if at least 2. These guys' lives revolve around horses. It's all about the horses, and from breaking in new horses that have never been ridden before like that, to the daily practice in the summer of lassoing the young foals in order to milk their mothers, the mares. Mare's milk is the kind of national drink of Mongolia, and to get it you have to trick the mums into giving it down, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So the young foals are caught and tied down, and then the mothers are brought in and they siphon off the milk, which is, like I say, the preferred way to drink it is called arak, which is a slightly fermented version, where they leave it to sit with a bit of yogurt inside, and everyone drinks it. I mean, really, the kids, everyone, and we worked it out. It's 3% alcohol. I mean, it's the strength of a Heineken beer, and I know this because the first time I tried it, it's very deceptive. It doesn't taste alcoholic at all. It's a slightly cheesy, acquired taste, but it's very nice. But if you have a bowl like that, especially in quick succession, you certainly feel it. But like I say, even the kids, they're all doing it. Might explain actually part of the reason why they're such a friendly bunch. I don't know. I mean, Mongolians are some of the friendliest people I've ever met in the world. This was when we were on the move with them, so everything comes down. That's the kind of skeleton of a ger, if you see what I mean. That's the door just going away. And yeah, we went on the move with them, which was one of the great experiences I had during the filming of Human Planet. It was incredible, and I don't know, it's hard to explain. A combination of something to do with the fact that in the 21st century, I just love the fact that people are still nomads. And these are 21st century nomads. They're not struggling to move out of this existence. They're quite happy with this life. And it's very heartwarming, travelling with a family that's so close-knit and you know, not always happy, obviously, with the journey, but it's one of those, Mongolia is one of those places where I highly advise anyone, if you can make it there, do. It's one of those countries that will change your life. The people are incredible. That's their, yeah, they've got a lot more horses than that now. I was back there this summer. That's corralling the goats at the end of the day there. So in the western Mongolia, people look slightly different. They're Kazakhs, really. It just happens to be called Mongolia, that section of the Altai Mountains. And we were there, obviously the landscape's slightly different again. That's that guy there, actually. It's an area famous, I suppose, for the practice of eagle hunting with golden eagles, which is the reason we went there, to shoot this guy, Silau, and his son, in fact. 6 months, we were there in the winter. 6 months prior to that, a small crew was sent out to film Silau's son collecting a young golden eagle chick from its nest. He then spent 6 months raising it, and that's it. Believe it or not, that's it after 6 months, which was quite a surprise to me. I didn't realise eagles elongated that quickly, but that's a sort of 6 to 8 month old golden eagle. The story, if you probably remember, was about Silau tutoring Berik, his son, in the art of hunting with his golden eagle. It was just another one of those stories which I had to keep pinching myself when we were out there, because it really was an incredible 3 weeks. I mean, these guys were such horsemen, as you can see here, that they go anywhere. And they have to. I mean, this landscape is unforgiving. But we were there. If you remember in the programme, there was a making of at the end of it that showed the problems we had trying to film this. We were there 3 weeks in the end. We were essentially trying to film a golden eagle catching a fox, a wild fox, which is the main thing they hunt. As you can see, Silau's caught a lot of foxes in the past. This is all fox fur. And it's not that easy, funnily enough. Quite easy to catch, but not easy to film, because they move so quickly, and we were, well, we were us, you know, carrying all our stupid, clumsy gear. But about 3 weeks in, we got lucky. I was actually, at the time, standing right next to the cameraman as well, and we both got exactly the same footage of, his was a bit better than mine, because film cameras can zoom in a lot further, but quite an incredible experience, just being there, let alone, that's the unglamorous side of fox hunting, as you can see, that dragging it away, but the thing I mean, I did love this story. Funny enough, I'm a vegetarian, and I have been since I was 18, so animal slaughter and things like that, it's not something I'm too fond of, but it was a lovely thing, seeing a young boy and his eagle so close. They sleep together, they do everything together, and if they're to be believed, and I'm not sure whether this is true, but after 7 years of work, they release them back into the wild. That's the tradition. Whether or not it happens, I don't know. That was Beric flying his eagle. We used that on the front cover of the book, of the whole series, because it was, yeah, it's one of my favourite images from the whole series. And that's, yeah, that's the Altai Mountains of Bulgaria. You wake up to that every morning. Somewhere I'd highly advise you to go if you can. Moving on to the Oceans programme, I think, personally for me, the most interesting story came from the Philippines. It was a story about compressor divers, something that we all felt quite strongly about by the end of, because it's quite a divisive issue. It's essentially a method of fishing which is a kind of hybrid of an older method called moro army. Moro army was a way of fishing a reef using breath divers, where you set up a net at one end of the reef, say like a reef that's like 5 to 10 meters underwater, and then you scare fish into the net using a long line of men. That was outlawed in the 80s because a lot of children were being used to fish with it. The sort of 2010 version of it involves compressed air pipes, which I used so people can fish at much deeper depths. These are the two boats that we were on. We had our own boat, which is obviously where I shot the photo from, and we went out to sea for 2 weeks with these guys around Cebu in the Philippines, which is quite a famous place actually for tourists, especially backpackers. They love hanging out there. It's one of those bits of the world that's dotted with beautiful islands. So each ship had about 40 guys on it. That's the captain there on the right, who ran a very tight ship, and quite rightly so, because it was an incredibly dangerous way of fishing, as you'll see. That's the tools of the trade if you're a compressor diver. Weight belt, obviously, a fin, a homemade fin to give you a bit of propulsion, and some kind of mask. Mainly these old 1970s kind of like, you know, masks, not at all easy to use. And that's how you breathe. And I tried it. It's incredibly difficult. If you're a diver, you'll appreciate you use a regulator when you dive, which means you can breathe in and then breathe out. When you dive on a compressor line, it's essentially just blasting a jet of air into your mouth, and you have to work out how you can breathe it in without it A, shooting down your throat, and B, how do you breathe out while this blast of air is coming in. I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. And these guys dive to, we were diving quite regularly to 40 meters, which, if you're a diver, is something. If you're using just normal compressed air, you'll be down there for 10 minutes maximum. And these guys were 45 minutes up to an hour down there. So I'll talk you through the process of compressor diving. You start off, everyone gets ready, you see all their lines, kind of, they all go up to here, and then they go to the compressor, which is at the back. First of all, about 4 people dive down to the bottom. This is a reef at about 40 meters. The South China Sea, where we filmed this, funny enough, is famously one of the clearest seas in the world, and it really is incredible. You can see the topography of the land when you're diving there. The water is so clear. So a few people dive down first, and then they drop a large net, as you can see here, and unravel it on one side of the reef. So you've got your round reef here. You take one corner, and you lay out this net, which is a huge, great thing. I mean, from top to bottom, it was probably about 25 meters. Once it's then pinned to the ground, the top of it is floating using bottles with air in it. Meanwhile, up on the surface, the second boat drives round to the opposite end of the reef, to this huge net, and all the divers are dropped in a line. They then swim down and all grab hold of this line here that you can see there. It's called a scare, they call it a scare line, or we call it a scare line actually, because no one had done this before, which is basically a bit of rope covered in pieces of ribbon. They all grab it and slowly move en masse across the reef towards the open net, blowing bubbles from their compressors as they go, which forms this kind of wall of scare. You know? Consequently, everything that's in front of them, fish-wise, just darts ahead, and before they know it, they've swum straight into the net. When the guys make it to the net, they then all kind of move in together and slowly pull the net together, ending up with a huge ball of fish, essentially. And there you go. It's a very effective way of fishing, obviously. Ecologically, it's a catastrophe because it wipes sort of 70% of the life off the reef. But like I say, after we spent 2 weeks living on the boats with these guys, it became very hard to blame them for what they were doing. Once the net has been gathered under the water, it's then pulled up, and it makes its way to the surface, and there you go. Gets pulled on. Not great hauls of fish. Certainly, if you spoke to the lads on the boat 10 years ago, they were making a lot more money than they are now. Like I say, we were on this boat for some 2 weeks, and we got really quite close to the boys. I mean, they were quite a scary bunch on first look. A lot of tattoos, a lot of toothless guys, you know. But they were incredibly polite and friendly. And like I said, the captain was such a force in their lives. He kind of ordered them to be friendly in the beginning. But there was a lot of card playing. That's the whole of the boat. There was a DVD player in the whole of the boat, as you can see. That's Tom, the director. That's most of the nights we were spent watching terrible Filipino pop music videos, which, if you've been to the Philippines, you'll know what I mean. It's just the worst, and it's loud, and of course they played it as loud as they could. That's the way they like it in the Philippines. It wasn't all work. Most evenings we would put up more on a boat next to one of the thousands of tropical islands around there, and yeah, it's a beautiful place, that part of the Philippines. Yeah, I think I stuck that in there just to show you how clear the water was, but I've already told you that, haven't I? Okay, so the bends, if you're a diver, nitrogen narcosis is something that, this is the major problem these guys have, and there's not a lot we can do about that. We were administering oxygen all the time, but really the day we left, we knew full well that life was going to go back exactly the same as before we were there. When you're spending an hour at 40 metres, you can't not get the bends, even if you're breathing water from, well, you can't. When you're breathing normal compressed air, you're going to get it. And, there's quite a high turnover of compressor divers, as you can quite imagine. Another of the problems that they face when you're down there, and one of the times I was diving, this happened. If you lose your line when you're under the... Essentially, it's quite easy to forget that your line is in your mouth, I should imagine, and if it tugs too hard, it flies out, and at that moment the boat may be quite a long way away, and suddenly your line will just go, as it has done here, and then you have to swim as hard as you can, grab hold of it and put it towards yourself again without taking a breath. A very dangerous form of fishing. Okay, I'll talk about a jungles story now from the Central African Republic. It was also one of the more talked about stories during when the programme aired. It was in the Congo Valley of the Central African Republic. The Bayaka people, who are, well, if you're, depending on what you believe and the origins of man, there are people that say that their genome, I mean, I'm sure there's someone in here who could probably say this better than me, but They have the genome in there. They have the genome from which you can trace back the origin of Homo sapiens. Anyway, it's not that important, but they're an incredibly nice bunch of people, I can tell you that. Very friendly, and they live an incredibly simple life still. Probably, as it goes, well, my experience is one of the most simplest ways of living I've seen. Very hand-to-mouth, very not concerned too much about the future, not concerned really at all about the past, just living day by day. We stayed in a village of about 70 people for 2 weeks in the middle of the jungle with them. There are people. They live deep in the forest, and they're the kind of people that grow up in the trees. They're very confident in the jungle. Puts people like me to shame when I'm in there. And two of the members of the community we were staying with, these guys on the left, Tete, and on the right, Mongonje, were well-respected tree climbers. And the reason we actually went there to film them was to film climbing trees to collect honey from bees' nests way up in these huge trees, the kind of trees that inspire awe in you when you're standing at the bottom of them. This is Tete about to climb one such tree, essentially using just a piece of liana, and as you'll see later, not something to be taken lightly. The process involves essentially making a series of footholds up the tree as you go with that axe, and it gives me a shiver when I think about it now. Leaning back on this piece of liana as you go is the only thing holding you onto the tree. And bearing in mind this is a 50-metre tree. These are big trees. That's Mongonje at the base of the tree. While your mate is climbing, you stand at the bottom of the tree and you hold a bundle of burning wet leaves which serve to smoke the bees and pacify them, because you're after the honey, essentially. That's just a quick picture of the same shot. So that's looking from the other way. This, obviously, I had to climb the tree to get this photo. Not like that, you'll be pleased to know. We had a rope access, a specialist there from Western Arboretum in Bristol, who rigged the tree, essentially. Let me just down now. He, before this guy started climbing, essentially, Tim, our rope access guy, fired a line with this giant catapult right up to the crown of the tree, about 50 metres up, and then rigged the tree with 2 ropes, and then we belayed up, if you know what belaying is, and you've probably seen it. You kind of grip onto the rope and then push with your foot, and you grip and push, and slowly but surely you get up. And then obviously to take the shot, then we drag the ropes up so there's nothing showing below me. Like I say, Mongonje, as you can see here, is just holding up. That's what's holding him on. And I get a shiver when I look at it, because the worst part about abseiling for me is that bit when you have to sit down on thin air. And Tim, our rope access guy, told us every single day, I think, the chances of a rope snapping, a climbing rope snapping, are almost zero. I don't think there's ever been a recorded version of that happening. Maybe when it was, I don't know, rubbing on a bit of rock or whatever, but not in the situation we were in. And these guys were literally using, that bit of liana got grabbed. We're standing at the bottom of the tree and say, right, I want to climb this one. I'll go, okay, and then they'll pop off into the jungle. 5 minutes later, come back with this bit of liana, and off they go. And I don't know if you notice it, if you look closer, it's fraying here and there, and that's simply because, this is a fresh one. It's an incredibly, I've got a lot of respect for these guys for doing what they do, but they didn't really seem to give a hoot, to be honest. It was totally normal for them to do it that way, and in fact, on one occasion, we wanted to get Tete up into the tree.